Welcome back to Camp Conversations, the podcast where we share tools, strategies, and stories of resilience to support you in your everyday life. Today, I am so excited to have Ilona Spaar, clinical hypnotherapist, on the podcast for me. This is one of the funnest podcasts I've done to date because I got to participate in 2 hypnotherapy sessions with Ilona, and we debrief how that went for me. So sit back, relax, and enjoy, and join me on my journey of being under hypnotherapy, and learn with me if it is a journey that would benefit you and your own resilience. We had a really interesting sort of meeting in the first place. I had attended a little group gathering in Vancouver with entrepreneurs, met a friend through that experience, and he introduced me to Ilona. We met on LinkedIn, and when I first messaged her, it came back that she had a #1 ranking in hypnotherapy, and I got so excited because I have always been interested in hypnotherapy, particularly from a professional standpoint as a place where I could refer clients that maybe aren't responding to traditional talk therapy. And from a personal standpoint, I'm always looking at different ways to explore my own resilience because I like to experience different therapies before I recommend them to others. And I feel like at this stage of life, being a mom, having young kids, trying to balance building a business with having another existing business, I can feel I'm just on that threshold of burnout. And I'm always trying to bring new practices into my life to not cross that threshold. And so I reached out to you, Ilona, and I was like, can you be on my podcast and can you do hypnotherapy on me so I can talk about it? And you said yes. And so I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, Dayna. Yeah, I'm so glad you reached out.
Yay. And I want to start off by just getting to know how you got into hypnotherapy, because that's not something that you hear of often. So can you just start by telling me your story?
Yes, that's right, of course. Yeah, so my business is relatively young. It's now 1 year old, actually. And before that, I was from a complete different background. I'm a historian by training. I have this academic background. But my last job was a very high demanding job. I was working at the Vancouver Holocaust Education Center,
Mhm.
where I would meet a lot of people with trauma. I work closely together with the Holocaust survivors, other genocide survivors, Indian residential school survivors. And so that really made me think of how do we process trauma and what happens in the brain, what is memory, and so on. And so I always had an interest in that. And then in my private life, speaking of burnout, I actually had a burnout. I was also myself diagnosed with complex PTSD. And
Mhm.
so I discovered hypnotherapy and somatic EMDR. That's something that I'm also doing. I discovered that for myself, and both of those modalities helped me so much.
Mhm.
And to the point where I was so fascinated, I started to study the neuroscience behind hypnotherapy, that neuroplasticity, our brain's ability to basically change and rewire. Yeah, and so one thing led to the other, and I did it. I had this mid 40s career change, really.
That's amazing. And I'm thinking that a couple questions are popping into my
Yes.
head that I've never asked you in our because audience. I'm gonna go into my experience doing the hypnotherapy with you, and I'll share a bit what that was like for me, and I'll let Ilona like talk about how why she chose to go those directions and share a bit about from the perspective of the facilitator. But Ilona, can you now do your hypnotherapy and EMDR practices for yourself?
You mean if I can self-hypnose myself?
Yeah, do you do these? Like, do you go through? Can you record yourself and run your own
I
session?
could do that, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't prefer it. Well, also because I have so many dear colleagues who I 100% trust.
Mm-hmm.
And so we actually support each other. I have them work on me, but I could do it if I wanted to. And
Neat.
of course, I mean, all the tools that I provide to my clients, I also practice. This is a lot of nervous system regulation, for example, that is key, I think, for
Mm-hmm.
pretty much everyone, but especially us women when we have so much on the go, we're
Mm-hmm.
doing multitasking, you name it, you know it.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I could do it. I prefer when my colleagues take care of me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I was curious about that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe I'll start by jumping into what I wanted to work on when I spoke to you,
Yes.
because I wasn't really sure what to do. And I was talking to one of my colleagues that has gone through somatic EMDR training and
Mm-hmm.
had done hypnotherapy sessions. And she said to me, she's like, well, what is the specific thing you're going to work on? And I had this panic moment of, I don't know. Is there supposed to be a specific thing?
Mm-hmm.
And so I brought two ideas to you. And so if someone is considering it, I think that's really nice to know is you can help decide which direction we go. And so I presented two scenarios to you. One of the scenarios was around this sort of burnout piece and moving towards decision making fatigue,
Mm-hmm.
and wanting to explore that and some of the resilience that goes along with it. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what we decided to work on. And the other one was around a separation anxiety due to a traumatic experience that I personally experienced. And so I said, okay, this is how many. Originally, we talked about doing one session. Here's the two things that I think are most present in my life right now that act as barriers. Which one should we work on? And you gave me this nice breakdown of, well, if we focus in on this one, it would be beneficial to have around this many sessions if we focus in on this one. So we were able to decide together which was more feasible. And we did it virtually, which was
That's right.
really neat. And you kind of
Mm-hmm.
gave me some warnings before doing it virtually. You said some people don't respond as well to virtually. Mm-hmm.
Yes. I mean, first of all, I get that question asked all the time. Does it even work virtually? And yes, it does. Um, my recommendation is when you do it virtually, like really make sure, of course, that you have your own room, that you really take the time, and if possible, and I think that's important, that it's a room where you can relax, because sometimes certain rooms there's certain attachments and so on, and that could be a bit distracting. So that's the number one. Besides, of course, very strong Wi-Fi. We don't want that connection to
Yeah.
break, right? Uh, Also, always put your pets in a different room. It's so funny, but they're really attracted. Maybe it's my voice or the energy or whatever, and then they climb on the client. So that's of course very disruptive. So lock your
Good.
pets in. Yeah, so it works. Um, I do want to say if I do free consultation calls, and I always ask my clients, do you want to do online session or in person? And if possible, I still recommend for them to come in. And
Mm-hmm.
it has to do because my clinic space is very, even that itself is kind of healing, it's quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that for relaxation, deep relaxation, which you need in hypnotherapy to get into under hypnosis. It's a good thing to have sort of a neutral healing space, right, where they can already relax. But
Yeah.
both ways work. And by the way, for somatic EMDR, the ibuprofen, that works online too.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really valuable piece. When I did my sessions with you, I did one, and then I told her, I'm like, I can feel that I need to do another one. And so we ended up doing a follow-up. And I was able to do them in my office, which felt safe to me because I know it's a confidential space, that there is no risk of anyone um, ever walking in. But if I think about doing it from home, I don't think I would be quite as comfortable because there
Yeah,
is always the risk. Like, what if someone knocks on the door?
exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you did a really nice piece to at the end of asking me if there were any hesitations or fears I had. And I knew going into it that I would be worried about the time. So we just were able to talk about that
Mm-hmm.
beforehand. And so I then was able to sit back and really lean into it because I knew we had already talked about the things that I was worried about or that I knew I would mull over during the session.
Yes. And, anything that could be stressors for that session, of course, like in your case, I know it was the time. Of course, we try to bring down to a minimum because, again, full relaxation is very important.
Mhm.
And I do want to say or refer to something that you said earlier, that you said that I helped you sort of to break down, come up with a bit of a treatment plan. And I always do that. And I just want to say for our listeners, even if you don't know what you want to work on or you're not sure, well, that's what I'm here for, right? I often
Mhm.
reflect back. And the nice thing about hypnotherapy is I'm able after even sometimes after the free consultation call to even list to you the things or even the order of things we could work on. It's you will receive a very clear treatment plan, which
Mhm.
I know many of my clients really appreciate it, right?
Yes,
It
and I
feels
did too.
less overwhelming also.
Well, even the one that I was working on with you around sort of this resilience burnout piece, you were able to break it down. And from that first session to the second session, so maybe I'll start out what my experience was. So we talked about what it felt like and what it felt like in my body. And you began the session with me sort of putting me into different scenarios and asking me how that felt. And I really could feel differences in my body that I haven't felt before because I have done like similar things in yoga classes. But again, I was in a room, I was a little more aware of who else was in there and what was going on. But in this one, I really felt that when certain topics were brought up, I was getting smaller and I could feel the shrinking happening. And it came up almost like I was noticing almost pain points that I hadn't really noticed in before. But when they appeared as you were asking me questions, I was like, oh yeah, that's there a lot. And we were able to then focus in on things. And I think in the first session, the one I keep sharing with my friends that really
Yeah.
boggled my mind, um, was that you had me walk down steps to my
Mhm.
subconscious, right? Am I right?
Yes,
Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
And I remember as I was walking down, and there had been this piece where you said, take your thoughts and separate. They're going to go onto this island. And as I was going down the steps, I had this momentary pause where it almost felt like I floated back up the steps and I had a little panic. And I asked myself, like, what are my hands doing right now? Because you had, when we had set up the video, you said, I need to see your face and your hands. And I realized as I was going down the steps, I didn't know what my hands were doing kind of in the real world. And so I said, what are my hands doing right now? I can't tell. I can't tell if they're moving. I can't tell if they're up,
Mm-hmm.
down. And then I was able to go, no, that is not a thought I need to focus on. It doesn't matter. And I was able to put them back down on the island. And then when I got to this subconscious room, one of the things you asked me is what it says on the walls. And some clear, I'm not a very visual person.
Mm-hmm.
And so for anyone doing this and saying, thinking that, like I'm not, I don't have visual dreams. I'm not visual at all.
Mm-hmm.
My interior decor would let anyone know that. And so
Not that bad from what I see.
my mom helped.
Okay.
And so I got into this room and you said, look around and you will see. And I didn't see. The entire thing was pretty dark to me. It was more feelings. But these thoughts, you said, read what the needs are on the wall. And I had like a 2 minute, not 2 minute, probably 2 second panic. And I'm like, I can't read because I don't see this way. And all of a sudden, these clear thoughts popped into my head. And I was like, wow, I have never thought that clearly before. This is a problem that I tend to mull over and over and have different narratives and different perspectives. And it popped in quite clearly. And then we removed those needs, and the next level was solutions. And there weren't any for me yet. And you said, as it was going, don't worry if you don't hear anything. And you, from talking to me, were able to give some lines that really aligned and resonated with my heart.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the other nice piece was it didn't feel like I was in this panic to find the solution because I had never clearly articulated the problem. And so when I went back up the stairs with you,
Mm-hmm.
there was this real relief from articulating the problem and this sense of peace on, like, this is a journey I can keep going on. Like, I don't need to have the answer. So I want to share that with the audience because if you're anything like me and you're listening to a podcast, you often listen to podcasts because you're like, I want a solution. Give me the solution. And I am very solution driven. And I think I realized that the solution was actually figuring out what the problem was. And that was really neat.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. Well, a couple of things here. So you have to understand that a lot of those, we work with you on your belief systems, and I know boundaries was a topic too, and so on. Sometimes that negative self-talk, and all those patterns, belief systems, habits. So those are deeply ingrained in the subconscious mind, right? It comes from childhood, socialization, you name it. It can be pretty much from everywhere. And you have to understand that we have them for a long time. And so change, or even you said you couldn't see or read the solutions yet. Well, that's okay. It's sometimes a very subtle process because that change, we hang on to those belief systems for so long, our entire lives sometimes. So of course it will take a bit of time. Sometimes it's very gradual, but and as you so nicely described, that's where I come in as your guide, basically as a hypnotherapist, right? And like that's exactly why I'm there for. I help you to navigate through that, even that in that moment, that uncertainty, if you didn't have yet the solutions, right? So that's what a trained hypnotherapist does. And yeah, go ahead.
You did one thing that I still can't figure out how you did it, actually, because we hadn't clearly articulated what was going on, and I'm comfortable sharing this with the audience, um, because I think so many females can relate to this. Societally, many of us were taught this. Is one of the thoughts that popped up very clearly for me when we were trying to highlight, like, what are those heavy thoughts, the ones that were making um, me feel weighted. And one that very clearly popped into my brain was having a lot of needs is unlovable. And that came like just, and I've known that I've always had trouble asking for things when I feel like I need support with them. But I had never really made that connection to me feeling like it was an unlovable quality. And you said when you were summarizing, and I can't remember like where this was and what we're doing, but you summarized it back in the positive. You
Yes.
have, like, I can't remember what exactly the words are,
Yes.
but you have needs and they are, um, and you're still lovable, or
Yes.
it's something along those lines.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's such a good example. I basically reframed it for you, but in a positive way. And in hypnotherapy, when we work with that subconscious mind, that's basically what we do. We reframe, and we want to collapse those neural pathways. So that belief system, like you just said, um, having lots of needs is not lovable. That's a very strong signal or information that your brain carries. And we want to collapse that and override with something positive. And
Mm-hmm.
and that's exactly what we did, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very good example. And again, it takes a bit of time. This does not sometimes not happen in just one session, but through consistency and repetition, those I'm going back to those neural pathways, those that information will strengthen. It has to be repeated many, many times, and through that, it will be activated over and over. And I
Yeah.
think that's why I gave you also some affirmations, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
bit of homework that my clients get. And that's not just some, sometimes people think of affirmations as, whatever, because it seems so simple, but there is a reason. Like, we want your brain to constantly repeat it. We want to strengthen that strong, healthy neural pathway, that anchor that we just set, right?
Yes.
Want that to become your default mode in your brain.
Yes. And I think the piece I really loved about that is I think so many of us, our default, when I pick up a journal, for example, my default is to unload the things that I'm carrying that feel heavy. And it's just to put the heavy, put the heavy, put the heavy. And there is some neuroscience saying that if you're always letting the heavy out, if you're always replaying the challenging story, the problems, sometimes that can even take away your motivation to take the action step towards lightening the load. And I
Yes, I would
thought,
agree.
yeah. And what was so neat about the hypnotherapy for me with that piece is where I often work from with talk therapy is we start with soft curiosity,
Mhm.
that empathy piece of exploring like why it makes sense. And that's what you did with me is okay, let's look at the roots of this. Why does it make sense? Even though I didn't even know what the thing I was trying to make sense of was, you helped me clarify. Oh, here's kind of where my maladapted thought pattern is. And this is why it makes sense. And then I like to move to the strategic curiosity of idea. Now, what are we going to do about it? What's our action step we're going to take? And I didn't know you were going to go there because I got to the point I'm like, I understand why it makes sense. Why don't I know the answer? No, I'm okay. Just understand. And then you brought in the affirmations that were like, now here's our strategic step.
Yeah.
And when I went home that was the first time, because I like to do my journal usually before bed or when I wake up in the morning,
Yeah.
where it didn't start with this kind of, I feel like I sometimes try and bring in gratitude because I'm like, I am grateful, but it doesn't really resonate with me. And it felt like
Yeah.
I had these real affirmations, if we want to call them. They felt more than affirmations to me, but they
Mhm.
felt like things that directly aligned with me. And that felt really nice to have that of, here's my affirmations, having needs is lovable. And then I was able to take that next action step of, okay, well, now let's start talking about what are these needs that I've been suppressing because they've felt unlovable in the past. Like, it gave me not just the homework you gave me, but it gave me actionable steps beyond that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, and um, I think what you just described, that's what a lot of my clients appreciated. So yeah, it's work with the subconscious mind. Sometimes they don't even remember all the parts, but then that homework, so with the affirmation, like I give them concrete tools, all of my clients to do at home.
Mhm.
So and so it's kind of very anchored then in the everyday life, which a lot of my clients appreciate.
Yes. And then the next session was nice too because it felt like we were able to go deeper.
Yes.
And then that session, for anyone that's curious that's listening, I don't remember that session as clearly, to be honest. I don't,
Yes, that's okay. And you
yeah,
know what? Okay, so just a couple of things here,
yeah.
and that's totally fine. And in a way, it just shows that, oh, you trusted the whole process more, so you went in even a bit deeper. That's why you don't remember all the parts. And then some ask me, well, but if I don't remember all in detail, did it still work? Yes, absolutely. The subconscious mind is never asleep, you see? That's the
Hmm.
beauty of it. I'm sure you've heard, like even when you sleep and you hear music, your subconscious mind still takes in all the information or the music or whatever it is. So the same here. And in the second session, so what we did is called the professional term is called future progression. And
Okay.
I love that because so you have to understand the subconscious mind cannot differentiate um, past, present, and future. It's all together.
Okay.
And what that means is that we can use that for healing processes. That's why sometimes under hypnosis, I bring back my client to the past and sometimes to the future. And in your case, we we went through the process where I guided you to see your future healed self.
This is
And
funny to hear because I really don't
you
remember
don't
this.
remember. And
I
what
remember a feeling, which I'll tell after, but I don't remember
yeah,
what. Yeah.
yes. But basically, what we do is we train your brain, or in a way, we already practice your healthy future and train your brain. It's almost like you know already what to do. And of
Mm.
course, I guide you through. And through that, we set those new anchors. So again, eventually, this will become your default mode. And it's often quite actually even emotional when my clients see their future self
Hmm.
happy, healthy, resilient, whatever it is. And it's almost like we harvest from the future
Hmm.
for the present moment. It's basically time traveling, right?
Which
Some
makes
people
sense.
call it quantum jumping, whatever you want to name it.
Call it what? What was that part?
Quantum jumping.
Jumping, quantum
Jumping.
jumping. Oh, yeah. That's neat because, yeah, it's funny. As you were describing it, I felt myself get a little emotional, and I'm not sure why. Um, but then the feeling I remember, and I think I told
Yeah.
you after, was I felt this. Uh, I guess if you're not watching, I felt this real lift in my spine. I felt as almost this light went up the back of my spine and out the top of my head. and really like this, yeah, this weight had been lifted off of my
Yeah.
shoulders, and that came out standing taller and
Mhm.
feeling, I don't even know if stronger is the right word, but feeling, having a deeper trust in myself.
Yeah.
And that was one that we had been talking about, that you were guiding me through,
Yes,
is
that's right.
trusting. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, with that, so um, I also, I don't know if you remember that, but I actually, and sometimes I do that, I'm also working quite intuitive. So we brought in your ancestors, your female ancestors. Do you remember that at all?
No, no.
Yeah, that's okay. Um, and sometimes I do that because obviously they would be very interested and care about your well-being, right?
Mm-hmm.
You are their lineage.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be just a metaphor. The subconscious mind speaks in metaphors, or maybe you believe in your ancestor spirits. It doesn't matter so much, but the point is that you could all, like, it's almost like an extra strength that you need in this moment, right? And now I know that what you just described with standing taller, because I could feel it too as I was doing it. I
Mm-hmm.
know that came from your ancestors.
Mm.
And don't ask me why I know, I just know. But the other thing that I also want to say is with the standing taller and also allowing yourself to take on more space.
Mm-hmm.
When we are anxious or traumatized or just even nervous or so, we tend to contract to make ourselves smaller, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like we don't want to be seen, or
Mm-hmm.
it just doesn't even feel safe to be fully present. And so we also worked on that. And that has a lot to do if we come back to your needs, or having your needs seen and heard and understood, right?
Mm.
And so that's the other piece we worked on.
I
Yeah.
love that. It's, but as you say that, I'm hearing their voices connected to what we were talking about.
Yeah.
And that really makes a clear picture for me. I'm curious for you,
Mm-hmm.
what was the thing that you felt the most helpful? Like, was there a certain aspect of your own journey through somatic EMDR or
Mm-hmm.
hypnotherapy that you felt the most helpful?
Um, well, that's so much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what there's one aspect, and I still really appreciate it so much, which is that we all have that ability in us, like basically this is not even, it's not even new. I
Mm-hmm.
know neuroscience has all these research surveys now, but I think ancient uh, peoples, in other words, with other terms and so on, they always kind of knew about that. And so, and what I think is so fascinating is that we all have a brain and a body, and our brain, like that neuroplasticity part, that we can change our brains, our thoughts. I mean, the mind is powerful, powerful, and that body mind connection also so powerful. And so we don't need extra tools in the sense of like external this and that. If you
Mm-hmm.
have the right guidance, it's your own brain has that it's an innate ability already. It's simply a
Mm-hmm.
matter of remember and discover it. And
Yeah.
that's what I like so much about it, right? um
And I think the piece that I really liked about it too was, and from women that I meet, I hear this as a common challenge, is that so many of us default to the pleaser mode.
oh,
That often when we try and explore what is your actual need here, it's quite challenging. And I hear so often women telling me, they're like, well, it depends who asks me, and it also depends on what the context of the situation is and who the other people are in that environment, because they are so accustomed to putting the needs of others first
Yeah.
that even that superficial level of narratives is really hard to filter through. And I personally experienced that superficial level of narratives. I can go and talk them through over and over and journal about them. But it wasn't until I had you as a guide to kind of go that one step deeper did I feel like I actually got more of that internal intuition or
Yeah.
ancestral or spiritual. Like that voice got louder. But I really have found that before that, even if I read back through journals, it really fluctuates depending on external circumstances in my life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we women, and that's, I mean, there's so many reasons, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of socialization, patriarch structures, and so on. I could go on for a long time, but
Oh, yeah.
the point is that we have learned to adapt so skillfully, in a way, to all kinds of situations. Um, and often because it doesn't feel safe to be really ourselves. And by the way, and you brought up that people pleasing, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad finally people are talking more about that, because it's now also recognized, the people pleasing and appeasing. Some people call it fawning, like
Mm-hmm.
FAWNING, is now recognized as another trauma response, and it especially often happens with women. So
Mm-hmm.
there is fight, flight, freeze, and fawning. And what happens is that often women fawn, so adjust, even sometimes say things that they think the other person or the other group wants to hear, because it does really not feel safe. And the
Mm-hmm.
safest thing in this moment is not listening to your own needs. It's not even to set up boundaries or anything like that, because for one way or the other, they're scared, right? It's just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel safe in that moment. And so what they do is that people pleasing, yes, yes, and even adapt,
Mm-hmm.
being not their authentic self. And that's something, it's my prediction that I think people will talk way more about that as we go
Mm-hmm.
into the future. Because I don't know one woman who does not or did not do that.
Yeah, same. And I like that you bring up that it is the safety piece, because I think it takes a layer of shame off of it for people.
Exactly. Oh, yes.
It's not, and so I think it's not happening really on that conscious level. And so
Oh no, of course not.
yeah,
It's a survival strategy, and it's real. It's
yeah,
real.
because
It's
we
not
need
that you have control in that moment.
no, and we've historically had to belong to stay alive. And
Exactly.
so it makes sense that this happens, and I just like bringing that conversation to the surface, um, because I feel so. I don't like seeing women come at midlife and beyond and say, I'm embarrassed or have a shame around the fact that they don't know who their authentic self is.
Yeah,
And it makes sense that you don't know. And so it's okay. And I
exactly.
think this connecting with people like you is a really beautiful way to start tapping that
Yeah.
into.
I think the shame and the guilt part is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I do want to say that both hypnotherapy and somatic EMDR is really helpful with that. I work with a lot of shame and guilt pieces.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah. Mhm.
highlight for us? Because I think we've touched on sort of my experience and what brought me, but
Mhm.
maybe not all of the reasons why people connect with you. Can you kind of highlight for us why or who, or just if we have any listeners that are curious if they would benefit
Yes.
from chatting with you? Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, in my experience, it's effective to all kinds of people. And when I say all kinds, it's like my oldest client is 85. My youngest client was 5 years old.
Whoa.
Yes. So, and everything in between. And so there is no age gap there or anything. And the other thing is that I get often asked, can everyone get hypnotized? And there is a small group of people it doesn't work. In my experience, I have never met this person. Like they say about 5 to 7% cannot get hypnotized. Again, it never happened to me. So far, all my clients were able to get hypnotized. It does look different with different people. Now, in terms of what I treat, so I do specialize on anxiety, stress, trauma, and PTSD because it's very dear to my heart. You've heard my own, I guess, my own personal history. But having said that, I treat many other issues. For example, bruxism, which is teeth clenching and grinding, often very stress related. That's a big one. And with that, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, also very often stress related. In those two cases, of course, I always advise to also talk to your medical doctor or dentist, whoever it is. I also treat any kinds of phobia, for example, phobia of using the elevator, phobia of heights, and so on. I even work with pain management. Now, I'm not a medical doctor. I cannot change, the biological structures, of course, but what I can help with is changing the perception of the pain by your brain. Again, it's that reframing, right? So things like that, any kind of sleep issues is a big one. And then in general, a lot of also what's basically always included in the package is nervous system regulation. I cannot say that enough, which includes, by the way, the body. Sometimes people think hypnotherapy, well, it's obviously it is about the brain, but you know how you earlier said, I had you feel it in the body. So the feeling in the body, that like the somatic approach, that feeling is actually the bridge to the subconscious mind. So yes, it's brain and body. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but so I see all sorts of clients. Yeah.
And do many of them that come, are any of them skeptical?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they are. But I also want to say that I'm often the last resource because they tried everything else and it didn't help, or they felt stuck and so ever. And yeah, I mean, so they are desperate, in other words, right?
Yeah.
And when you're desperate, well, you even choose something maybe that you're at first skeptical. But that's why I also offer those free consultation calls. Besides being a practitioner, I really love to educate about hypnotherapy. Also, sadly, there's still lots of misconceptions about it out there. It's mind control or whatever people think.
Yeah.
Well, it has nothing to do with that, right?
Yeah. And are there any dangers to it?
Dangers? No, absolutely not. And I mean, the only danger is, the one thing I want to say is, if you choose a hypnotherapist, please really do your research and make sure they're certified, they're trauma informed. Look for the clinical hypnotherapy. Make sure that. But other than that, no, there are no dangers. And I tell you also why, because you can only get hypnotized and it only works if you're open towards it. You still have free will. You can still say no. And then, of course, it doesn't work, right?
Yeah. And I could feel that throughout our whole session
Yeah.
was that I had to choose to let myself go with it. And I could feel that if
Exactly.
I wanted, I could choose to just kind of zone you out
Yeah,
and not engage.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. So that's what I mean. You always have the control, right?
Mm-hmm. And I
Yes.
think if anyone is nervous or scared of whether or not they can do that, I mean, you can start with just listening to an audio relaxation tape.
Yes. And I actually, and that brings me to something you touched on earlier. You said you're not very visual. And I want to point out that you don't have to be even very visual. And don't you worry about that for the listeners out there also, because always ask, are you more visual or not? Can you imagine things? And
Mm-hmm.
if not, I mean, I had sessions with clients, it was all about smell and taste,
Mm-hmm.
tactile. I bring all the senses in. And even if you can't see it, then we go into, well, can you feel the essence of it? Or could
Yes.
you imagine? Yes, so there are many ways, you don't have to be fully visual. It
No,
still
and
works.
that's it. I think that was my bias, was thinking that it was visual, but it in no way felt a hindrance because I perceive the world, I think, through movement. And everything that you did was, or every guidance piece that I remember, it was how my body interacted with the space, like
Yes.
walking through, feeling warmth, feeling.
Yes,
And so
exactly.
I could feel myself in all of those spaces. But that's probably aligns with how I store memories. I don't think I store memories visually. So it didn't feel odd to me at all.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yes, yes. I also want to say, for the overthinkers out there, which are many of us, me included, like there are ways, even if you come to hypnotherapy and you have that busy brain. And remember, Dayna, when you said we send your brain away. So obviously, I have tools in my toolbox as a hypnotherapist to stop or make the overthinking mind stop. So,
Mhm.
or sometimes we give it another task. Anyways, there are tools. So, there are always there are ways, like don't be so worried. And I have that often with female clients. Oh, do I do it right? Or
Mhm.
how you said, did I move my hands? And
Yeah. Am I
don't
doing
you worry,
something
like there
weird?
is no right, no wrong, just
Mhm.
trust the process. And if anything, let's say you would do anything that I don't ask you to, or any, like I will check in with you. I mean, again, that's why I'm here for, I'm your guide.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I like that piece too because I think I remember most of the tools and the tools that I
Mhm.
have been using since. And that is often when I see people even in counseling, one of the first questions they ask me is, are you going to send me home with some tools?
Yes.
And so I think that's a really neat piece because people are often looking for these tools. And yeah, I mean, of all of the things that I have done around resilience, this is definitely one of the ones that has topped it and has really given me a toolbox that I continue to carry with me every day. Um, for anyone listening, is there anything that you think I've missed touching on or that would be valuable to share with our audience?
Well, I just want to say that in your case, we did 2 sessions,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that was not even, we didn't even get to the deepest trauma work or whatever,
Hmm.
which is fine.
Hmm.
Um, but I just wanted to say that uh, in sometimes people ask me, well, how many sessions will I need, and so on.
Yeah.
And of course, it depends. But I do want to say the average is anywhere between 7 and 10 sessions,
Mhm.
sometimes even 5. Of course, again, it depends on how deep you want to go, and it's always up to the client. But if you think about it, it's actually not that much. in the sense of how effective it is, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes people go for years into counseling and talk therapy and so on. So I just want to put that out there, that it is effective and you don't need that many sessions. And the other thing I wanted to say, we didn't really talk too much about the somatic EMDR that I also offer. I mean, that is, I can, for the deep trauma work, it helped me so much. I can see how it helps others. And sometimes people are asking, well, can you combine the two? And the answer is yes, like not in the same session, of course, but they complement each other very nicely. In fact, even somatic EMDR has certain elements that we use in hypnotherapy.
Can you explain somatic EMDR for people?
Yes, of course. So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And so what happens is when we experience trauma or any kind of stresses, our brain cannot really process it or is confused, and it's somehow the processing is not completed. That's why we sometimes get triggered. Let's say, even though the trauma, let's say, was many years ago, we still get triggered in certain situations. And through bilateral movement, which is often the eye movement, people, I know this is a podcast, but what I'm doing right now is moving my fingers from one side to the others and my eyes following it. So that bilateral movement of the eyes, and it could be other bilateral movement too. For example, shoulder tapping or rocking from one side to the other. That brings you out of that fear, fight, flight, or fawning mode, that state of often panic, when the amygdala goes crazy from that sympathetic state, and it brings you into the parasympathetic state. It brings you into what is called the prefrontal cortex is activated, and that's sort of your calming center. That's your rational center. And often in trauma, because it's pure survival mode, we are exactly not in that state. And so a somatic EMDR practitioner asks you to reprocess your trauma, like we bring it up. We will be talking about it by doing those bilateral movements. And really what it does is it takes the emotional charge out of it. And I help you to complete that process of the memory so you can store it and okay, it's safe now. And like translated into everyday life. So what that means is the next time, let's say there is a potential trigger or so, well, you're not responding to it anymore in that way. It's not interfering with your everyday life anymore, because we took the emotional charge out of it, and B, we already helped to complete that cycle, that trauma.
Yeah, and I think when people hear trauma too, sometimes they think like the really big traumas.
Yes,
and
which I work with a lot.
Yeah,
my clients.
I've done somatic EMDR in university for test taking, and it was really effective because I had bad experiences with tests. As soon as I sat down in the auditorium, I went into panic. I had a really hard time finding any of the answers that I prepared for. And then afterwards, it completely changed my experience in dealing with tests. So it can be
it's really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Now, the one thing I want to say, so I'm trained in the somatic EMDR, and maybe just for some, you may have heard of EMDR, but then what is somatic EMDR? Well, it's based on EMDR, but the reprocessing also includes the processing in the body, because I strongly believe trauma also is stored in the body. So there has certain release has to happen. So in other words, it's the classic EMDR, but also with a special focus on the body, which I think, especially for women, is so important to also address that side of the trauma, right? Yeah.
Completely. Thank you so much for explaining all of that. And again, you said at the start that you can do that virtually as well with you.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you, Ilona. And again, like, for anyone listening and curious why I only did 2 sessions, we did 2 sessions before the podcast, and it is definitely something that I'm drawn to continue because of how well it resonated for me. And so I encourage everyone listening to add this as something to potentially explore if you are on your own journey of really tapping into that authentic self, or processing some challenges, or trying to make big life decisions. I want them to connect with you. You'll be connected in our show notes, so that people can find your website and reach out to you. And I think that's so neat to hear that you do workshops and trainings as well, because just listening, we can hear how effective this can be in the workplace, because for many of us, that is where we are engaged in that fight, flight, freeze space. And having a common language around it with the leaders in that space or our colleagues is really beneficial.
Thank you so much, Dayna. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Also, thank you for sharing your experience with my sessions. It was an honor to help.
Thank you. All right, audience, we will check back in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.